Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which is set to release on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC on June 30th. And today we're going to be checking out the very first wave of Switch skill attacks / Silkbind attacks that are going to be making their way into Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Capcom went ahead and dropped 3 reveal trailers showcasing for 3 specific weapons, the sword and shield, the switch axe, and the heavy bow gun as well. So each one of these weapons is going to have multiple switch skills, as we kind of went over Silkbind attacks. And I thought I'd give my quick reactions to each one of them, as also a quick breakdown as well, since there is a lot to go over for each one. So starting with the sword and shield, we do get the confirmation that oils are officially back. This is something that I spoke about just a couple of days ago, since we got Game 8's. This is a Japanese outlet. They kind of confirmed that was going to be the case. So we now have direct confirmation from Capcom that the Destroy Oil Silkbind attack is actually going to be making an appearance in Hunter Rise Sunbreak. It says that it uses a wire bug to cover your blade with a special ointment that makes monsters flinch more easily. Now, one of the things that we did specifically get wrong in that other video was that we did mention that it was going to raise your attack in one way or another, and or presumably give you critical hit strikes, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. They don't mention you becoming more powerful. It just gives you a better chance to flinch a monster. Now, flinch is one of those kind of like unspoken benefits that you do get from certain weapons. KO damage is way more beneficial. Of course, cutting damage is way more important if you care about that. So flinching is good if you want to kind of keep staggering a monster. It's not the same as paralyzed. It kind of just stuns them for a little bit, sends them back, kind of like makes them readjust. But other than that, flinch is not necessarily something that you see a lot of weapons focus on. But because sword and shield is so fast and so combo oriented, they do showcase that it's going to be one of those good things. At the same time, they also showcase the switch skill that you are basically going to be just mashing out attacks with these things, as long as you can maintain your silk binds, which is something that we've spoken about before. You are going to want to keep as many silk binds available for your typical evades. But at the same time, you also need to make sure that if you want to dish out damage, you're basically going to be using like Destroyer Oil and then Metsu Shokugeki, and basically just switch out attacks back and forth. Now again, you're still wasting soul binds. You're still going to need some, especially in Master Rank / G Rank, for defensive purposes. But the way that they're presenting it is, you're basically going to want to switch as fast as possible and make the best benefit of it. They do also showcase in the second switch, basically that they do the Destroyer Oil. Then when they do the Metsu Shokugeki, they actually switch, like this, do the switch swap evade, which we spoke about before. So they kind of like reposition. They do the Destroyer Oil kind of like in Aurora Somnican's body, and then they quickly switch swap evade into the head, and then they do the Metsu Shokugeki right there. So it's a pretty cool combination that they did, but again, you got to keep in mind that you are wasting wire bugs whenever you do this. So you know, it can be situational, but you know, certain weapons are certainly going to try to abuse this as best as possible. Now, I think the video that we're going to go over is, of course, the switch axe. And I think this one is the most interesting one out of all the weapons that they decided to showcase, because it is just ridiculously bonkers the level of combinational attacks you're going to have with this weapon. Not that that is as much of a surprise, since it was already very combo heavy, and now you're just going to be doing that even more so than before. So the switch skill that they showcase here is called Elemental Burst Counter, where it basically says it compresses the switch gauge into energy that can be released as an elemental burst. So you kind of see the Hunter in Astalos armor, Master Rank Astalos armor, kind of do these big heavy swipes, and then kind of like do a big discharge once you are able to kind of like get on top of a monster, and then, you know, you do the typical discharge that's elemental. It's all combined with the switch charger and the switch skill at the same time, switch skill swap. So they then showcase the switch charger switch skill swap, which is like 2 combinations in a row, and then they do the elemental burst counter, which is just a whole heck of a lot of attacks on a very quick discharge. Then the second combo they showcase an axe-wide sweep, which is not a combination of Silkbind attack, that is just a typical normal weapon attack. Then they do the switch skill swap, and then they go into the brand new 2-axe morph / combo, which this one is just ridiculous. So the way that they showcase it in the combat against the lava Allmother, I always forget that magma Allmother name. They do the finishing discharge, which is like, again, one of the first ones that we actually saw in the first beginning of the clip. Then they do the switch skill swap after they land on the floor, and then they do a compressed finishing discharge, which is about 30 seconds or so of continual damage for the cost of 2 Silkbind basically attacks. Like, it is ridiculous amount of damage that you're going to be doing. Now, of course, the monster kind of needs to be on the side and or in front of you. If it starts to move around and zigzag, you can imagine monsters like Luna Garen, who love to zigzag and move around. They're going to give you a tough time to try to readjust for this, because you don't necessarily have a lot of time to readjust. You do get that switch skill swap evade to kind of like reposition yourself, but you can't be like jostling around with the switch axe, specifically when it comes to like preparing your brand new Silkbinds, comboing into each other in the switch skill swap. So it's just interesting in the way that they decided to handle this, that they're just showcasing already that the switch axe is just going to be abusing these attacks non-stop, and it's just really interesting. Now, the third and final weapon that we're going to be going over today, of course, is the heavy bowgun, and this one I do think is interesting only because they showcase one of the skills that not only did we predict, which is of course the crouching shot. This is something that I just recently put up a video on where GMA actually did get this one accurately, where it's basically the same siege weapon attack that you had before back in like Generations Ultimate, Generation 4, 3 Ultimate, that kind of thing. You're basically just going to be bursting out damage as you kind of crouch down. You are stuck in that same position. You are not going to be like directionally moving from left to right or anything along those lines, but you do have the option to aim up, down, left, and right. But since you're crouched and you're kind of stuck on attack, you're not going to be able to move until you finish your rounds. I believe it's like 10 to 12 rounds. They seem to speed up the more you're kind of like building into it. So the first 2 are kind of slow, the third and fourth a little bit faster, 5 and 6 faster than that, and then they build up to like the last 3 or 4, they're just back to back to back, which is really cool. So one of the first skills that they showcase here is of course the setting sun, this is something that we saw in the trailer showcase, and this is that little wheel that you kind of set up, and we originally speculated that all it basically did was give your shots a piercing benefit, but it turns out it's not only just a piercing benefit, it's only for weapons that are like doing quick fire attacks. So the description they posted reads as follows: a wire bug generates a ring that multi-hit ammo is fired through. The total number of hits increases upon impact. So not only does it give you piercing, but it gives piercing on piercing. So, and this one is gonna be like so broken if you do specifically like pierce build armors, like, or weapon sets. It's just gonna be ridiculously funny how you're just gonna be like kind of like, you know, slashing through damage. Now it also makes me wonder, if you put out a setting sun and then another heavy bowgun user puts out a setting sun in front of it, and another heavy bowgun user puts another one in front of it, and then a fourth one, so you stack up 4 setting suns in front of each other, and every single one of those hunters is doing piercing shots. Can you imagine the multiplier of damage you're doing at that point? It just becomes super silly. So I hope that's not the case, but it would be just really silly if Capcom overlooks that and then we end up getting that benefit from, you know, them overlooking something like that, which I presume that they would patch eventually. But, you know, it would just really be funny to see that happen. Now, they do showcase something that I do think is really, I don't know, bizarre or dumb, and that's the fact that they showcase the counter charge, which is one of those Silkbind attacks that we've never really had any much benefit for when it comes to heavy bowgun users. You basically sit around, you put in the wire bugs in the ground, and you wait for the monster to attack you. And then you do like a return shot kind of a thing. So they showcase here that you can do the counter charge, then you could do the switch skill swap, and then you could do the counter shot directly, which is just like, you know, redundancy on top of redundancy. It's ultra defensive, don't get me wrong. Presumably there could be a chance where, you know, you do get that benefit, but I just don't realistically see anyone really making use of that. Now the one that they do showcase that I do think people will probably use is the short shot, then switch skill swap into the crouching shot. Of course, there's the crouching shot, the one where it can just kind of speeds up builds up until the faster end of the rounds, if you will. So you end up bursting out like maybe 12 to 15 shots altogether. So what they do showcase here is that they do a charge shot first, then they do the sun, so they put out their little ring, and then when they do the crouching shots, they start like bursting out, and you could just see that thing piercing through, and it just kind of multiplies that damage on the tail. So presumably that tail can come off a little bit easier than it typically would. So heavy bowgun does seem to have a lot of piercing benefits here when it comes to some of the Silkbind attacks that they're adding to it, and we'll just have to see if light bowgun can actually keep up with just some of the piercing damage that heavy bowgun is now going to be dishing out. But that's about all the information that I wanted to go over. I'm glad that they put up 3 in one day, not 1 per day. Hopefully tomorrow we get some more interesting weapons, and of course I'll be going them over as well. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.